everyone, it's Sky here with a brand new tutorial on how to upcycle your old clothes, or perhaps your own thrifted clothes, into a brand new cosplay. So in the intro of this video you saw my before and you saw my after, and there I'm going to show you some of the techniques that I use to transform those thrifted items into something that is a full-fledged costume. Let's get to it. So one of the easiest ways that you can transform your clothes and upcycle them is by dyeing them. And there are two different dye methods that I used for Ellie. I used natural dyeing with tea, and I use artificial dye with the Rit dye. It's a classic when it comes to cosplayers, but for our more natural dyes, which I did with tea, but others can do with coffee, it's a slower process because it takes a little bit longer for tea and its dye to fully penetrate the fabric. However, it is a little bit on the safer side because, I mean, you can eat tea. You can boil your tea in a pot and put your clothes in there. And you don't have to worry about dyeing your insides. So, however, with more artificial dyes like Rit, you can get a more color change a lot faster, and also it is a little bit more vibrant of a color when you do so. However, with this kind of dye, you have to be able to use separate dye pots. So nothing that you will consume or eat out of afterwards, because you don't want to dye your insides blue. Not good. So let's see how I did it. I started off doing the tea dye because I figured it was going to take the longest, because, you know, natural dyeing. I took this Costco sized tea container and checked my materials, which was 60% cotton and 40% polyester. Boiled some water, added my tea bags, making sure that the water was hot but not boiling. Then I added in my shirt and kind of pressed it down with my spoon and gave it a swirl just to make sure it was all coated with that tea dye. And after about 12 hours of sitting in this pot, I checked it, and you can really see what parts are cotton and what parts are polyester, because the cotton tends to dye a little bit better because it's a natural fiber. I rinsed out my shirt, make sure the water ran clean. And after the first dry out, I noticed it wasn't as yellow as I wanted, so I decided to do another dye bath for 24 hours using the same pot of tea. Next, I decided to dye the jacket. This needed to be a lot more bluer than it actually was, and luckily it's 100% cotton, so it will definitely take up some dye. I used the Rit dye in navy blue, filled up the water, got it to a simmer, added in some liquid dish soap, and some salt. And gave everything a quick stir. I'm using tools that I will not be using to eat out of, so all these pots are going into the garage, as well as that spoon. I added in about half of the bottle of dye and gave it a quick stir. Next, I slowly added in my jacket and gave it another press down and some stirs. In just over 5 minutes, it started to look like this. In hindsight, I should have left it in for longer because as fabric gets wet, it will get darker, and it ended up drying a little bit lighter than I would have liked. I took the pot to the sink and rinsed out all of the dye, making sure that the water ran clear. And then finally washed the fabric with detergent. For our next piece of the tutorial is the weathering process. So, you can do a lot of things with just a paintbrush and some sandpaper. So with this, I went ahead and I sandpapered all of the edges and seams of my Ellie cosplay to make it look a little bit more worn. This like natural decay of the fibers and having it just like fray unnaturally is a great way to achieve that, you know, post-apocalyptic look. Let's see how I did it. I marked about where my knees were with some chalk so I could cut them later. Boop.
And then I simply took some sandpaper and really sanded and wore down all of the edges around the cuts, just so the fabric would fray a lot more. Here's the final result. For this kind of weathering, you want to make sure you don't sand the structural seams, so the seams around the crotch, and sort of stick to the outer seams and the major parts of the pants, because we don't want to accidentally flash anyone with ripped jeans. For the jacket, I just simply took off the sleeve with some scissors. Jacket cuts are pretty fine because, again, this is a post-apocalyptic jacket. We want to make sure it looks worn and almost torn off. After it was cut off, I took my sandpaper again and really went to town. I think I sanded so hard that I accidentally sanded my thumbnail. And here's that frayed look. The end of this jacket has a really cool, asymmetrical design, so I went ahead and made it more asymmetrical by ripping and tearing some pieces off. One more time with the sandpaper, just to get those frayed edges. And adding a little slit right there to make a more diverse jacket. There we have it. For the shirt, it was actually pretty easy to get these little tiny, I call them moth holes, in them. Basically, I just rubbed them really hard with sandpaper. I think you see the theme.
You've had all of your pieces thoroughly destroyed with sandpaper and scissors. Now, I like to move on to my next favorite method of weathering, which is with fabric paint. Fabric paint will allow you to achieve all of those dusty, dirty, bloody looks without actually doing that, which, don't go to the con all stinky and covered in dirt. Please, I'm begging you. But it's very simple with just some fabric paint and a paintbrush and even your hands. Check it out.
Using a combination of fabric paint, textile medium, and some good old craft paint, I was able to make some nice colors. For the pants, I stuck with doing sort of grays because they were pretty black, and just sort of dabbed my brush into there and used my finger to really get that texture. Around the holes, I did this sort of gradient, it was kind of fading away almost. And I decided to dapple the other parts of the pants with some leftover paint just to give it more diversity. I went ahead and added some dirt around the holes, just basically dirt anywhere that would make sense, and lightened the jacket seams, and added some dried blood, which is typically a darker brown color. For the shirt, I just added more of the dark blood around the edges and the holes, and I was done.
And with these few steps and very little cost, and also for using something that was probably not going to get bought up and used at a Goodwill anytime soon, I was able to transform it into a full cosplay. Upcycling your cosplays is a great way to give old clothes a new life, ratted clothes a new life, and even to just make them look better on you. Upcycling is a great way to both help the environment and fight fast fashion and cosplay, and it's also a great way to sort of hone some of these skills that you don't really get to do until you're at the end of a project. I'm hoping that you enjoyed this tutorial, and I have a clicker mask short that's available for your viewing. But I hope this was helpful to you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I just want to do a special thanks to my patrons, Martin, Bulls, Brandon, Nux, and the Phoenix Ghost. Thank you all so much for your support, and I hope you like this video. Bye-bye!